Chapter 12 of the Hampstead Mystery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. The Hampstead Mystery by John Watson and Arthur Rees. Chapter 12. "Do you think Hill's story is true?" Rolfe asked Inspector Chippenfield as they left Camden Town Police Station and turned in the direction of the Tube station. "We'll soon find out," replied the inspector. "Of course there is something in it, but there is no doubt Hill will not stick at a lie to save his own skin. But we are more likely to get at the truth by threatening to arrest him than by arresting him. If he were arrested he would probably shut up and say no more." "And are you going to arrest Birchill?" "Yes." "For the murder?" asked Rolfe. "No, for burglary. It would be a mistake to charge him with murder until we get more evidence. The papers would jeer at us if we charged him with murder and then dropped the charge." "Do you think Birchill will squeak?" "On Hill?" said the inspector. "When he knows that Hill has been trying to fit him for the murder he'll try to do as much for Hill, and between them we'll come at the truth. We are on the right track at last, my boy, and, thank God, we have beaten our friend Crewe." Inspector Chippenfield's satisfaction in his impending triumph over Crewe was increased by a chance meeting with the detective. As the two police officials came out of Leicester Square Station on their way to Scotland Yard to obtain a warrant for Birchill's arrest, they saw Crewe in a taxi cab. Crewe also saw them, and telling the driver to pull up, leaned out of the window and looked back at the two detectives. When they came up with the taxi cab they saw that Crewe had on a light overcoat and that there was a suit case beside the driver. Crewe was going on a journey of some kind. "Anything fresh about the Riversbrook case?" he asked. "No, nothing fresh," replied Inspector Chippenfield, looking Crewe straight in the face. "You are a long time in making an arrest," said Crewe in a bantering tone. "We want to arrest the right man," was the reply. "There's nothing like getting the right man to start with. It saves such a lot of time and trouble. Where are you off to?" "I'm taking a run down to Scotland." The inspector glanced at Crewe rather enviously. "You are fortunate in being able to enjoy yourself just now," he said meaningly. "I won't drop work altogether," remarked Crewe. "I'll make a few inquiries there." "About the Riversbrook affair?" "Yes." With the murderer practically arrested, Inspector Chippenfield permitted himself the luxury of smiling at the way in which Crewe was following up a false scent. "I thought the murder was committed in London, not in Scotland," he said. "Wrong, Chippenfield," said Crewe with a smile. "Sir Horace was murdered in Scotland, and his body was brought up to London by train and placed in his own house in order to mislead the police. Good bye." As the taxi cab drove off, Inspector Chippenfield turned to his subordinate and said: "We'll rub it into him when he comes back and finds that we've got our man under lock and key. He's on some wild goose chase. Scotland! He might as well go to Siberia while he's about it." With the warrant in his pocket, Inspector Chippenfield, accompanied by Rolfe, set out for Macaulay Mansions, Westminster. They found the Mansions to be situated in a quiet and superior part of Westminster, not far from Victoria Station, and consisting of a large block of flats overlooking a square. a pocket handkerchief patch of green, which was supposed to serve as breathing space for the flats which surrounded it. Macaulay Mansions had no lift, and number 43, the scene of the events of Hill's confession, was on the top floor. Inspector Chippenfield and Rolfe mounted the stairs steadily, and finally found themselves standing on a neat cocoanut door mat outside the door of number 43. The door was closed. "Well, well," said the inspector as he paused panting on the door mat and rang the bell. "Snug quarters these, very snug. Strange that these sort of women never know enough to run straight when they are well off." The door opened and a young woman confronted them. She was hardly more than a girl, pretty and refined looking, with large dark eyes, a pathetic drooping mouth, and a wistful expression. She wore a well-made indoor dress of soft satin without ornaments, and her luxuriant dark hair was simply and becomingly coiled at the back of her head. She held a book in her left hand, with one finger between the leaves, as though the summons to the door had interrupted her reading, and glanced inquiringly at the visitors, waiting for them to intimate their business. She was so different from the type of girl they had expected to see that Inspector Chippenfield had some difficulty in announcing it. "Are you Miss Fanning?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Then you are the young woman we wish to see, and with your permission we'll come inside," said Inspector Chippenfield, recovering from his first surprise and speaking briskly. They followed the girl into the hall, and into a room off the hall to which she led the way. A small Pomeranian dog, which lay on an easy chair, sprang up barking shrilly at their entrance, but at the command of the girl it settled down on its silk cushion again. The apartment was a small sitting room, daintily furnished in excellent feminine taste. Both police officers took in the contents of the room with the glance of trained observers, and both noticed that, prominent among the ornaments on the mantelpiece, stood a photograph of the late Sir Horace Fewbanks in a handsome silver frame. The photograph made it easy for Inspector Chippenfield to enter upon the object of the visit of himself and his subordinate to the flat. "I see you have a photograph of Sir Horace Fewbanks there," he said in what he intended to be an easy conversational tone, waving his hand towards the mantelpiece. The wistful expression of the girl's face deepened as she followed his glance. "Yes," she said simply. "It is so terrible about him." "Was he a relative of yours?" asked the inspector. She had come to the conclusion they were police officers, and that they were aware of the position she occupied. "He was very kind to me," she replied. "When did you see him last? How long before he died?" "Are you detectives?" she asked. "From Scotland Yard," replied Inspector Chippenfield with a bow. "Why have you come here? Do you think that I know anything about the murder?" "Not in the least." The inspector's tone was reassuring. "We merely want information about Sir Horace's movements prior to his departure for Scotland. When did you see him last?" "I don't remember," she said after a pause. "You must try," said the inspector in a tone which contained a suggestion of command. "Oh, a few days before he went away." "A few days?" repeated the inspector. "And you parted on good terms?" "Yes, on very good terms." She met his glance frankly. Inspector Chippenfield was silent for a moment. Then, fixing his fiercest stare on the girl, he remarked abruptly, Where's Birchill?"